Let's go ahead and look at the minutes from the December 19th meeting. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review those.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that we approve the minutes from the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals from December 19, 2023.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right. Motion made.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Second by Peter. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Let's go ahead and move on then to the staff reports.
Connor prepared the 2023 year in review information for you. I think it's good information to kind of look at what's the normal and where we've come from in the past year. As I told you several times, our single-family building permits were up considerably in 2023, and we don't anticipate any big changes in that path. We're hearing from the builders that there are lots available and news of potential decreases in mortgage interest rates, that they don't see any decrease in the market because we have a shortage of housing in the entire metro area.
Thank you, Les. Do you feel like most of the homes from the tornado are repaired by now? I mean, I drive even down Andover Road, you see some on the east side that aren't, but.
There are just a handful
Okay.
that aren't completed yet.
Okay. Any questions for staff? For Les or Connor? No?
No.
All right. Thank you, Les. Well, let's go ahead then and move on to agenda item 5.1, which is the calendar for this year. The Planning Commission and the Board of Zoning and Appeals. It's the same days of the month, isn't it? Yeah, it looked like it was to me, but I couldn't tell.
Yeah,
I
the
didn't look
meeting,
through the whole
meeting
year.
dates are the same. We just have to go through annually and make adjustments for any conflicts with holidays.
Sure.
Both for your meeting dates, but also our application dates.
Yep. Yeah, very good. Anybody have any questions or?
No, do we need to make a motion on?
I don't think so.
approving it?
Just review it, right?
You would make a motion to approve your.
Oh, it
calendar.
does say review and approve. Okay, very good. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll do it. I kind of just did it. I'm Marla Canfield, move we approve the 2024 Planning Commission schedule.
Thank you, Marla. We have a second?
Go ahead, Clint. I saw you moving.
I'll second. Clint Tyner.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the 2024 calendar. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion passes. Let's go ahead and move on to the annexation petition. They're at the Turnpike Business Park. Let's go ahead and get down here. Staff, you have some items you want to share on that?
Sure. The petition that's before you tonight is related to the Turnpike Business Park preliminary PUD that's next on your agenda. Only the areas are slightly different because there are two property owners involved. One, the applicant for the Turnpike Business Park, and the other, the Kansas Turnpike Authority. There was kind of an odd-shaped parcel of land involved that the applicant and the Turnpike have worked out a swap of properties to kind of square up the boundaries of the PUD and the Turnpike's maintenance yard, where they put asphalt plants and barrier walls and so forth as they're doing construction. You can see up there in that exhibit that the PUD line and the annexation line aren't exactly the same. So they've worked this swap, and the Turnpike has agreed to annex along with the applicant for the business park. The property is served by Rural Water District Number 5, who has a pipeline on the Prairie Creek Road side of the project. And it has City of Andover sanitary sewer that is stubbed up to the southwest corner of the site. So public utilities are available, and staff recommends to you that you recommend annexation to the governing body.
I want to let the rest of the committee know, we saw this in subdivision last week. So Gary, you were there,
Mm-hmm.
and Marla, you were there too. So we talked about this at length last week as well. See the applicants here, I believe. Would you guys like to say anything? You don't have to.
Well, I don't know if you had any questions.
You came all the way in, so
Well, I live in Andover, it's not too
you know
far.
you fought the crowds to come in. So if you would state your name and your address and
Yep.
if you have anything
Kevin
going-
Graham with MKC Civil Engineer, 411 North Webb in Wichita. It's MKC's address. Yeah, like Les mentioned, the KTA property is part of the annexation. And then you'll notice on the next item, the PUD. The KTA property is not included in the PUD, but is included in the annexation.
I'm sure you've all seen this, but this is essentially directly south of the Turnpike toll booth. They'd essentially be extending the road to the south. Yep. Any questions for the applicant?
No.
I don't. I think we asked any we had last week, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
So staff doesn't have any concerns of any kind? No. You guys have any questions?
The use of the facility, what's the primary use?
As you'll see in the next agenda item, the base zoning is I-1 industrial. There are some modifications. At first, we looked at just doing a straight zoning to I-1. When we looked in the zoning code, there was some provisions that we wanted to change, and then also some additional provisions that aren't in the UDM that we wanted to add into the district. So that's why it's a PUD instead of a straight zoning. But intended use would be, industrial, manufacturing, logistics, that type of use. The comprehensive plan that was
Last year?
done last year, is it adopted now?
Yeah.
That contemplated this part of town as an industrial type of use based on access off the turnpike. So I believe this parcel, and then if you went on the north side of the turnpike in the comp plan, those are both shown as this industrial type of use in the land plan.
Thank you.
Through the strategic planning didn't we start that at the end of 2022 even maybe? I think so. And everyone decided that there was a need for more industrial space. That's what he's talking about. Like he's talking about. Yeah, so it just seems to fit very well. So thank you very much. I guess I should ask any more questions from committee.
I have one more
Okay,
question.
sure.
So we're not adding any property to the city that hasn't been checked for hazardous materials or anything?
Jerry, did you guys do any sort of ESA on it? Okay. And that came up clean? Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I think we're good. Thank you. If there's no more questions, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that we recommend that the governing body approve the annexation petition for the Turnpike Business Park Planned Unit Development.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I'll second Clint Tynert.
All right, we have a motion, and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is this not a hearing?
Motion
about
passes.
that? The paper that we got in the mail said this was a hearing about it.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on then to item 5.3, which is the preliminary PUD of the Turnpike Business Park. Get to my correct page here. Sorry. I now call agenda item 5.3, which is a public hearing on case number Z-PUD23-0006. We'd like to welcome everyone interested in this hearing and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views you have as evidence so that an informed recommendation can be made by the Planning Commission to the governing body for their final decision. By state statute, the governing body does not have to hold another public hearing on this matter, although they may listen to whomever they wish. You will be asked if there's any new information which is not heard at this hearing. It is to everyone's advantage if you present all the necessary information at this hearing. After the city zoning administrator provides the commission with the background information, I will call upon the applicant. Public comments will be heard following the applicant. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The Planning Commission will close the hearing to public comments and then to consider the 14 factors on which to base the recommendation. During this time, the commission may direct questions to the applicant.
Logo image, the City of Andover agenda, Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, January 16th, 2024 at 7 p.m. City Hall, 1609 East Central Avenue. 1. Call to order. 2. Roll call. 3. Minutes 3.1, December 19th.
Can I use that?
4. Staff reports 4.1.
It's an option.
Is it an option? Maybe I should use it. The public and/or city staff. You should be aware that the Planning Commission can recommend that the site be platted or replatted if necessary, and that a site plan may be required for approval. You should be aware that any uses permitted outright in a district by the regulations can receive a zoning permit. Furthermore, if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
Official notice for this hearing was published on the City of Andover municipal website on December 22nd, 2023, and notices were mailed to the applicant and 27 real property owners of record in the area of notification on December 23rd, 2023. The record shows at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare that the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the commission if any one of them has received any ex parte verbal or written communication prior to this hearing which they would like to share.
None.
None.
I'll now call upon the applicant, I will now call upon the city's zoning administrator to provide us for a report on this case.
Planning Commissioners, the application before you tonight is for 66.5 acres of property adjoining the Kansas Turnpike just south of the Andover interchange for a change in zoning district to the industrial district and MXI district in order to put together a light manufacturing logistics type of park. The planned unit development calls out several limitations in the uses and adds some site plan type standards to the text of the planned unit development to bolster the screening, buffering, light control, that sort of thing, knowing that adjacent to the south, there is a residential subdivision. We've met both at the subdivision committee and as staff with the developer and their engineers, and worked through a lot of concerns we had with their PUD, and they've responded favorably to all of our concerns, and they're here tonight to present their case.
Thank you, Les. Any questions of Les? No. I now call upon the applicant to make his or her presentation on the request and any response to the zoning administrator's report.
Good evening again. My name is Kevin Grant with MKEC 411 North Webb in Wichita. As Les mentioned, this is a PUD with an industrial I-1 based zoning. As far as Les mentioned, we are sensitive. We had several conversations with staff about the residential to the south. So a couple of the things, the document you see that has blue text and red text, those are basically the revised, that's the latest version of additions. We kept those in there for now so you could see what the original was and what it was changed to as based on those conversations with staff. One of the elements regarding screening, so there is an existing hedgerow on the south. In the text, that is required to remain in place. And then per the UDM, based on this zoning and adjacent residential zonings, there's a requirement for a fence. There's also a provision in here for that to be a solid evergreen row as well. There's two options there. One of the things we wanted to do to help control site layout is this could potentially be split into multiple lots, just depending on how this develops out, is we wanted to be sensitive to operations and what part of the building is facing the residential to the south. So there's kind of two provisions in there that address that. And so basically that's in sections 3 and section 5. So operations, loading, unloading, things that make noise, heavy trucks cannot be within 100 feet of the residential. And then additionally, we were aiming to try to limit the number of overhead dock doors that could potentially be facing south or east to the residential. And so there's a restriction of so that the screening per UDM is either a fence or a continuous evergreen row. If there is a dock door within 300 feet of a residential line, that has to become a solid masonry wall. That'll help both visually and it also helps with noise, giving something more solid to buffer those. The intent of putting that in there was to try to, like I said, limit as developers, potential builders are looking at this area to try to orient their doors, inwards or away from the south primarily. So that's why that provision was put in there. There's some additional landscaping elements along the turnpike. Typically in industrial zoning, the landscape requirements are fairly minimal, as this will be somewhat of a front door to Andover when you're coming from the east coming into town. We wanted to add a little bit of green there along the turnpike so you just don't see a big wall of a building. So there is a provision for one canopy or shade tree per 100 feet or 3 ornamentals per shade tree, which is a provision that's out of the UDM.
Anything else?
I think like that is generally, there's some concepts in there. There's 2 of them actually, just behind the PUD exhibit. Those are just general ideas of what could potentially fit there. This example happens to be front load buildings with, docks on what would be the south side of the north building, north side of the south building. May or may not be what comes here, but this was more just get an idea of what something could look like here. But a lot of that will depend on just how this develops.
We saw these drawings last week as subdivision also. We talked about them a fair amount. Any questions of the applicant?
I have one question. The handling of the drainage of the area, these conceptual retention ponds that we see on here,
Mhm.
is that being done before anything's put in there, or we have an idea of at what point that'd be done?
Yep. So right now, this is just the preliminary PUD. What would come next would be the final PUD or the final plat. We would do that when we had a better feel for it. This shows a roadway kind of bisecting east-west. So if there was right-of-way or easements dedicated, you would do it at that. As a part of the city's platting process, a drainage study is required that analyzes this. I will say we've done some very initial analysis just to see there's 3 different watersheds. We've looked at the engineering drawings for the residential development to the south. So those ponds are generally in the locations they would go, and they're generally about the size that we would expect them to be based on some very rough calculations for detention storage that would be needed for a development like this. So
Thank you.
So Kevin, those would just be retention if there's rain, or would there be water in those ponds at all times?
Jerry, I don't know if you have a preference on that. Typically wet ponds, if there is a normal pool that is not detention, you can detain on top of that. So these could either be dry detention ponds or it could be a wet pond. I don't know if you have a preference. For example, all the ponds out at the Heritage, those are detention ponds and retention ponds. And so they do hold permanent water, but they also do store water as well. So you could go with either option here. It'd just be if there's a desire to have a wet aquatic feature in the area or not.
Any other questions? Here? No? Thank you, Kevin.
Mr. Chairperson, I have a couple questions for staff.
Yep.
This will have to go to site planning, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And are there any limitations on hours of operation for a light industrial park?
there are not in the zoning regulations.
Okay. Can there be restrictions placed on it?
I'm thinking about the operations in a logistics capacity of how that would work to limit operations of what is typically a 24-hour-a-day industry.
Okay. I used to work at Vornado, which
Sure.
is a light manufacturing. They did have trucks coming in the evening sometime. They weren't unloading and stuff, but typically they were parking up at the dock doors and things like that. There wasn't any manufacturing going on in the facility, typically after 5 o'clock. So I'm just wondering if this will be somewhat similar, or there might be other types of business coming in. Don't want to restrict the businesses that might come in that might employ people in Andover, but also don't want this to be a hub where there's lots of traffic, lots of noise for the residential.
Sure, and
Area.
that's exactly why we've had all these conversations with the applicant about additional screening and buffering and separation distances. And there's even text restricting lighting.
Mhm.
the proximity of lighting to property lines and the typical wall pack lighting is not allowed. It has to be by poles with down shading.
And Kevin did mention if there's an overhead door, you know, if it's within 300 feet, then you'd have to put a masonry wall up, which
Correct.
would help with sound dampening.
Correct.
Sure, if you've ever been out there, the Kansas Turnpike generates a
Oh,
tremendous amount of noise.
I hear the turnpike from my house
Sure.
in Kaywood.
You know, I used to live just down the road from this site.
Yeah.
And if anything, mass will deflect and absorb that sound.
Any other commission member questions for the applicant or staff?
I do that.
Peter? Oh, here.
That's it.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this case? If so, please line up and say your name and your address. Go for it.
Hi, my name is Rachel Bloom Livingood, and I am the co-owner with my husband at 2715 Prairie View Lane in Andover, which is one of the 27 houses apparently that got the letter. I am also the managing partner for Valeb Rentals, which also has at least one property that received a letter, but it comes to our office, so I don't know if the 3 properties we own in the area all got letters or just one. And then I'm also speaking on behalf of my parents tonight because they just came down with some sickness today, which is Lamont and Vicky Bloom, who are the owners of basically the entire east side of this issue. We would like it to stay as restricted as possible. We've been here since the 90s. I have a 3-month-old. Our plan is to raise that child exactly like I was raised in the farm with, you know, other residential area, not industrial. 100 feet in the country is not going to help the sound barrier. My parents are at least 100 feet from our house and we can yell at each other. Which, by the way, their house was completely destroyed by the tornado. So, and they're not done rebuilding. Our house was damaged in the tornado. We're not done rebuilding, but that's another day. The Prairie Creek Bridge is too small, nonetheless. The Prairie Creek Bridge going over the turnpike was supposed to be changed back when the zoning was changed so that the Prairie Creek Housing Addition could go in. We were told by the mayor at that time that that bridge would not stay that way because it's dangerous. And it is dangerous. And semis will not fit on that bridge.
Yeah.
So, which probably brings us to the next issue, which is then we have trucks that are coming down Meadowlark, which is the next road to the east, right? Sorry, I'm not a north-south person. I'm a left or right person. We've had Sherwin-Williams trucks and things like that. It's all picked up. We're in Bruno Township. We aren't part of the city. We don't get city money to take care of our roads. And Bruno Township is taxed when it comes to the roads and maintaining them. They're awful. And if we're going to increase traffic on that road, it's going to become impossible. I mean, it is, you should drive down Meadowlark if you haven't recently. It's not fun. So that's an issue. Not to mention, again, that's putting more not tax money, but taxing the budget of Bruno Township. The turnpike isn't that loud. It really isn't. And it comes and goes. There are times when you don't hear it, and there are times when it's heavy traffic and you do hear it. You hear it the most when they have all of their stuff set up at the exit so that they can do the road reworking. That's when we hear it. But otherwise, we don't really hear it. If that's going to be our backyard forever, you are taking away the country from us and our neighbors. And we have neighbors here who unfortunately don't fall in the area and they weren't notified, but they're still here saying that they don't, we don't want it either, but they'll speak for themselves. We just want it to stay as restricted as possible because it is an issue that you're going to be bringing extra people, you're going to be bringing extra noise. And I don't know where you think that road is leading to on the east, but you will my parents will have to die before they would ever sell their land. So I don't know that it's a good idea to think you're expanding that way. Thank you.
Other members of the public?
Hi, my name is Laura Wixton. I live at 1601 North Single Tree Circle. I'm kind of in the neighborhood of the Blooms. We aren't quite close enough for a letter, but this impacts us all in the country. I know that Andover sent out a survey asking the community what they thought about putting an industrial park up there. And from your survey, it was pretty blatant that nobody wanted an industrial park up there, whether it's light or heavy. So I don't understand how we missed that and we're still going ahead with that. That being said, the traffic for this and the noise and everything else, if there's no restrictions, great, thanks for putting in restrictions on the lights and stuff like that. But if there's no hour restrictions, if you're putting an Amazon warehouse in here, that's going to be heavy industrial, constant traffic, constant moving, constant noise. And I don't understand how the Prairie Creek subdivision, you could have gotten the okay from those people because that's not even built yet. So if that manufacturer or developer of that neighborhood is saying, yeah, great, bring it in, how are those people going to feel about that when they thought that they were just getting a neighborhood, but now they're right behind an industrial park? So now that those homes won't get built, possibly. I mean, I wouldn't want to live next to an industrial park. That's why I'm here. And I still am a mile away. So, I mean, those are all things to consider. I think that area, I understand with the turnpike being right there, there's opportunities for everyone. But I also understand that that's also not, I don't think the direction that Andover residents want an industrial park out there. It seems kind of like, I don't know, just like a waste since we already have an industrial park. That's right down the road. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak?
Yeah, my name is William Livingood. I live at 2715 Prairie View Lane, which is just to the east. Yeah, I'd just like to, is this question and answer, or is this just like testimonial only?
Pretty much it's just you speaking.
Just us speaking. Well, I'd really like to know, how do we stop it? It would be like, how do we throw a cog in it? But if more space is needed, like Andover, like the center of Andover is all abandoned light commercial, right? Like the shopping centers, they're all empty. So if it's a space issue, why don't you just repurpose the dead part of the dead city already, right? Like why push it out into the country more when you already have unused facilities that are at over here behind Wendy's and all that stuff that's over there? Like all those shopping centers are dead too. Like, but if you're fine with the traffic and you want vehicles in and out, then put these facilities there. Like you've got the space that's already zoned, repurpose them as need be, but we would just like it not in our backyard. Thanks.
My name is Christine Parker, Kristine. I live at 1625 North Single Tree Circle. I've been there since 1984. I was told that this is progress and it's a perfect location and low to no impact on the city of Andover citizens. I also understand that my address is not in the city of Andover. My children and myself have all attended Andover schools, so we are outlying citizens of Andover, and it is impacting other people who purposely move outside of the city so that we can have the peace and quiet and we can have the not worry about traffic and everything else coming out there. This just means that what are we going to have to move further out to get away from this stuff? I feel like there's so much other places that you could go. You used to live at 13th and Prairie Creek, right? I mean, it was peaceful out there. Now we have a housing addition out there, and nobody fought that. We're happy to invite more people out there, but this industrial stuff, it's not the way to go. I am here to speak against it, just like my neighbors are. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Anyone else? No? Does the applicant want to mention anything about the street? I mean, I think it's something we talked about in subdivision as part of our concern last week, and we talked about it. So I think it might be valuable for the public to hear, if you wouldn't mind, like Prairie Creek, for example.
Correct. So in terms of access, one of the reasons both in the comprehensive plan why this area was identified as this is a good use for this area is access to the turnpike. That's what makes it valuable. From a logistics, if you've got larger trucks, the value in this property is the connection directly onto the turnpike, not Prairie Creek Road. Les may be able to speak a little more to exactly what's going on with the bridge. My understanding is there is KDOT funding, and that is an active project that will be improved. I believe it's even getting a little higher last time we talked. So that will get improved. So from a logistics standpoint of where most of the ingress and egress from this development would be, it would be at the north end of the site onto the turnpike. We have had initial discussions, as we met with the city and with the fire department, of a connection point to Prairie Creek Road is valuable for life safety, fire, and police. Right now, if there was no connection to Prairie Creek, the only way to access this site, regardless of what goes there without a connection to Prairie Creek, is you have to cross the turnpike, get on 21st, go east on 21st, and then cross the turnpike back in. And so if you have anything on this site, getting a fire truck there and having to do this long route, and I can't remember the number of time, but there's a target goal that they try to say, we want to be able to respond and get to a location within X number of minutes. So that's the benefit of having a connection to Prairie Creek Road, is more for life safety and access for emergency response personnel. But from a logistics distribution, that's all going to go through the turnpike.
Wes, did you want to mention anything about the road he was talking about, Prairie Creek? I'm not telling you need to, but if you want to.
Sure. Several people mentioned that they had talked to staff or the mayor about this. We do have a joint project with the Kansas Turnpike Authority to improve that Prairie Creek Road bridge and the roadway connection all the way out to 21st Street. It's currently in the Turnpike's budget for their fiscal year 2026, which begins July 1 of 2025. So a little over a year from
A little
now.
ways out. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Jared.
Another thing regarding access, one of the biggest impetus for this type of development is the cashless tolling system that the Turnpike Authority is going to this year, so that that toll booth will no longer be there. The tolls will be collected electronically from sensors out on the roadway rather than enter and exit points. So that makes that bridge at the toll booth interchange open to public road. so that we could use it as a city street to serve this 66-acre parcel.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, my name's Jerry Jones. I'm at 121 North Mead in Wichita, Kansas, and I'm a partner in the development, proposed development of this property with the family that has it under contract and with the current owner of the property. I'm also a partner with that family in the development of the heritage at Yorktown and Kellogg, and have been working on that for 7 years. And as such, have been very interested and involved in the future growth and development of Andover, and as such participated in the workshops and one of the stakeholder groups for the comprehensive plan last year. And in this room, there were participated in a couple workshops where there were a lot of plans and thoughts that were papered these walls. And there was a lot of talk about how does Andover become a more well-rounded community. A lot of talk about how to attract business to Andover and jobs and create more economic opportunity for a greater number of people. And I believe as a result of that, the plan ended up showing some areas on the edge of Andover that they felt, the planners felt were appropriate for industrial type development for business parks. And I believe one of the reasons that this site was identified was because of its proximity to the turnpike and the interchange. And so that's what attracted us to it. And the business plan behind this is to take advantage of that interchange. And as Les said, the fact that that will be a tollless exchange here in the very near future. So there is already industrial activity that occurs on that site. And again, that was my impression from participating in that process of why this was selected. It wasn't the only site that was selected, but again, if you're going to attract large businesses that employ, create a lot of jobs, it's going to take larger tracts of land on the edge of town, not small pieces of ground, within the city limits. So that's why we have come before you for this zoning. It's really to be part of that growth and diversification of the economy of Andover. The one specific point that was brought up that I do want to address, because this is a conceptual plan, as Kevin mentioned a couple times. This is going to take a long time for this to come together. A lot of engineering and planning and discussion with actual businesses before anything happens here. And I can tell you it's probably going to end up looking a lot differently than that. When we first drew up our plans for the heritage, it didn't look anything like what we're doing now. These things evolve. But the idea is that it will be served by the interchange, and that is where the flow of traffic is going to go. We don't have any control to the property to the east, and that connection was just shown. If for at some point in time in the future, the city or the people that own that property want to make that connection, that'll happen. We have no power over that and don't seek to do that now. So that's really not the traffic aspect of this is really going to be focused and oriented around that interchange. So, and if you have any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer those. Gary? Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add two quick things is that just following up on the topic of the comprehensive plan. So one, as far as existing properties in Andover, that was a topic. Gary, I know you were on that. Vance, you may have been on the
Comprehensive planning. I was,
correct.
yeah.
I know several of you were. You know, Andover Road was a big topic of discussion and what to do there. And there's its own element of the comprehensive plan of what to do with Andover Road at kind of those major hubs. This area was identified as a good use. You know, this type of development is not an infill development. Usually you see it on the exterior. And then in terms of, we've talked about access to the turnpike, but in directions for Andover to grow, you know, there's a lot of floodplain in the south and east ends of Andover. And so it's, well, why doesn't this go on Kellogg? Why does it have to go on the turnpike? That's good access too. When you go further east on Kellogg, you start getting into floodplain issues. So it's hard to go east on Kellogg, where when you look at north and east ends of Andover, that's where your opportunities for future growth, you know, for the next 10, 15 years, that's where you're going to see ability to grow, where you're not inhibited by floodplain and drainage issues that are just going to make those areas hard to expand in that direction. So
Thank you.
My name is William Livingood, again, 2715 Prairie View Lane. And as I sit here and I look at this, like as they've said, this is going to be the gateway to Andover. And so the front doors of Andover is going to be an industrial complex. And as they point out, for life safety, you have to connect it to Prairie Creek. And Prairie Creek is a poor road at best. And so your front door to Andover is going to be an industrial park, and your foyer is going to be a dilapidated road that goes into duplex and 110K homes. Like that's going to be your welcome to Andover. We're an industrial complex and 110K homes. Like that just doesn't seem like a front door that I think Andover people would want. Like I wouldn't want that to be my city image. Like, I mean, I know school taxes go to Andover, but just seems like a poor design to want for your front door.
Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The Planning Commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation. So I want to do these.
I can do it. Can I ask one final question though of Les?
Yeah.
Can you visit back? They mentioned the survey being done of what Andover residents. Can you tell this council more about what the results of that were? Because I'm not remembering specifically. Because I know that they were put into the comprehensive plan, correct? Or I'm not remembering the survey, I guess.
Those properties around the Turnpike interchange were slated for a future land use for more industrial type uses because of the access to the Turnpike. I think what this young lady is referring to is that the plan was laid open to the public via a website, and there were comments taken through electronic polling. There were a few comments about that industrial, but in general, there was overwhelming support between not only the stakeholders that were invited, but the public that was a part of that planning process. They recognized not only the need for employment, but to better utilize the Turnpike.
Thank you. Sorry.
And Les, on that comprehensive plan, when they say stakeholders, Can you define that a little bit for us?
Stakeholders is everyone from the government to the developers of land.
Okay.
Those folks who might have a stake in future land uses.
Okay, so it's city government, those who are developing, spending their money in Andover. And then I remember, I was on that comprehensive plan as part of the planning commission and as a citizen. There were a lot of citizens. The school board was involved in that. It was quite a variety of individuals that were here. It wasn't just those who were looking to make money in Andover.
Sure.
It was individuals looking to develop Andover to increase opportunities for everybody, housing, jobs, schools, all those kinds of things.
We had input from several groups, Gary, and you were a part of a couple of those groups.
And there was,
We reached out as far as to elementary school students, high school, college students. The public in general was invited to participate in those charrettes, both in person and over the website. So if I had to guess at a number of responses that we got to the plan, we probably had close to 1,000 responses.
I recall the fire department was included,
Yeah.
police department,
Yeah.
schools, even, yeah.
yeah, I remember they were out at GAD, Greater Andover Days, asking people for their opinion on what needed to go where and what kind of things they wanted to see. So this isn't something that's just trying to be sprung on the community. And if I can take a second, Mr. Chairperson, if we go through these facts, and this is for the audience, if we go through these 14
Findings of fact.
findings of facts, thank you, and this does get approved, this then does go to city council. And if you don't agree with what we've done, you go and you hammer city council. We're here just to do zoning. If this meets all the requirements for the zoning, then it's up to us whether or not we approve it or not approve it based on those conditions, not on my personal opinion of what should be there or anything else. But we do want to have individuals' input, but you have a greater say when you talk at city council. Okay?
That's well said.
Ready?
Go for it.
All right,
Thanks,
so
Jerry.
staff items, number 1, do adequate sewage disposal, water supply, and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist, or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if changed zoning were approved? Staff, public water, sewer, and streets are available adjacent to the subject property and can be readily extended. Number 2, if zoning change request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide the needed right-of-ways, easements, building setback lines, or access of control? Staff, platting would be required. 3, if the zoning change required was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff, yes. Screening and buffering are required by the site plan review standards. 4, what fact-based information in support of or opposition to the requested zoning change have staff received? Staff, none at this time. 5, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? Staff, no error is known to exist. So staff and commission council items, number 6, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current zoning? Staff, the subject property is suitable for its current agriculture use.
And I'd
Concur.
like to make a comment on that as part of the planning commission, that this was found to be a very good potential site for an industrial park by the Activate Andover Comprehensive Plan.
Good.
So I concur with that, but in addition, that's what the comprehensive plan is.
7, is
Guiding
the
us
length of
to.
time the subject property has been vacant or undeveloped under its current zoning a factor in the zoning change request? Staff, no.
Concur.
8, how reasonably well suited will the requested zoning change of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff, the proposed uses are generally in conformance with the comprehensive plan industrial center place type, which suggests logistics, production, research, distribution, and limited manufacturing uses in a large-scale building surrounded by service areas, parking, landscape buffers to provide a transition to adjacent areas. The PUD provisions provide standards for the transition to nearby residences, uses that exceed the SPRC minimum standards.
Concur.
9, has the zoning change been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what's the nature and significance of those changes? Staff, yes. The upcoming changes to the Kansas Turnpike cashless tolling opens the interchange connections to 21st and the Kansas Turnpike to somewhat landlocked subject property.
Concur.
10, what are the current land uses, character, and condition of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the subject property is surrounded by a mixture of single-family residences, uses, and agriculture, but most importantly lies adjacent to the Kansas Turnpike.
Concur.
11, would the proposed zoning change of the subject property allow land uses which might have detrimental effects on nearby properties? If so, how? The proposed uses would have a potential increase to traffic, lighting, noise, etc., as compared to the current ag use. The proposed requirements for enhanced screening, buffering, landscaping, and lighting limitations would aid in the mitigation of the detrimental effects.
Concur.
12, would the requested zoning change conform to the city's comprehensive plan and or other adopted master plans and policies? Staff, the proposed uses are generally in conformance with the comprehensive industrial center place type, which suggests logistics, production, research, distribution, limited manufacturing, uses of large-scale buildings surrounded by service areas, parking, landscape buffers, and to provide a transition to adjacent uses.
Concur.
13, do any professional persons knowledgeable on the conditions that affect this zoning change request have information or recommendations to provide, or would that be helpful in this evaluation? Staff, approval as applied for.
Concur.
14, how would the potential loss in value or hardship opposed on the applicant compared to the relative gain to the public health, safety, welfare if there's a change from the current zone to the requested zone? Staff, no loss to public health or safety, welfare is perceived as a result of this change.
Concur.
Thank you, Marla. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our finding of fact, I would remind the commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it is based, and if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modification and approval, disapproval, or to table the discussion?
Mr. Chairperson, just for notification to the audience and those who are here residents, that this is the preliminary plan for this, or we're doing the zoning. There's still a lot of things that have to be taken into fact for this to actually be accomplished. So there's lots of opportunity for you all to express your opinions in the future. Having said that, Mr. Chairperson, having considered the evidence at the hearing and the factors to evaluate the application, I, Gary Israel, move that we recommend to the governing body that case number ZPUD 23-0006 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings 8, 9, 10, and 12 as recorded in the summary of this hearing.
We have a second.
I'll second Peter Fox.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. This case will be forwarded to the governing body with the planning commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at the regular meeting on January 30th of this year. The recording of this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days after the final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions in this case, but not directed to the commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the city clerk for 14 days after tonight. That's through January 30th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public street right-of-ways or specific statutorily excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council. All right, guess that takes care of that one. Thank you. Thank you for coming, guys. Also, the public, I appreciate you coming. I understand your thoughts and your concerns. I also understand the city's got to grow. So I understand both sides. It's not easy. I get it.
And you're not gonna bring in the kind of jobs that people need.
And the schools are already.
Well, I appreciate you coming.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Let's move on to 5.4, which is the preliminary plat of the Green Meadow properties.
Oh,
Oh, that's the one that was moved? Okay, sorry. I'm a little mixed up here.
yeah, you didn't do the update.
That's what I get for preparing a lot too early, I guess, huh? No.
If I may, just comment, it seemed like the biggest issue was we're taking the country away from these folks. And it appears in the subcommittee meetings that changes were made to the overall buffering of noise, the minimization of light, trying to get away from having a park there with trees and other things. Is there something else that could be done along those lines to help pertain or keep the country as much as we can? Because I have to tell you, I live very close to the turnpike. When the wind comes out of the north, I can tell you, it's coming out of the north. I can hear the trucks all the time. So it can be minimized.
Sure. The city grows. Change is imminent. For a person to think that they could own property on the edge of the city of Andover and be in the country seems like a stretch to me.
I won't
Like
disagree.
like the young lady said, I used to live out there. When I bought 40 acres, I bought 40 acres that was in the country. The city grew around me.
Right.
I moved on.
And I completely get that, but
Now-
I'm trying to pacify both
Sure,
the
and-
interests here.
As Gary said several times, this is just the first step in this process to establish the zone. They'll be back in front of you all for the final plats as they come through the process, and we'll get another shot at the shape and orientation of the lots, the streets, so forth. Then, as we move into the final users, they'll take a trip to our site plan review committee, who's going to look at each individual use and the building orientation, the landscaping, the lighting, circulation, so forth. And they'll be looking at these standards that are established by this PUD to try to buffer these uses from their adjoining neighbors.
And Peter, if I can add a little bit of experience to this, because I've developed a few industrial parks with clients previously in my history, that the you know, the center road that they're putting through the middle of that industrial park with the buildings on each side or the warehouses on each side actually does a lot to buffer the noise. And then the tree lines help buffer that noise too. The fact that it's really close to the turnpike actually reduces the amount of traffic that's going to have to come through Andover. I mean, if anything, if you're wanting to reduce the traffic, it's a prime location to get those trucks in and out of there. And as far as evening, I don't think, you know, we had evening traffic in those industrial parks, but they're like maybe 5 to 10% compared to the day traffic. So it reduces it quite a bit. And then beyond that, if we had a neighbor that complained about some of the noise, after the fact, we built the concrete walls to buffer the sound even more after the whole thing was already done. And so I'm sure that's available at any point in time if somebody feels like, you know, the noise is too much. But I just wanted to give that experience from previous industrial parks that, you know, it's really not that noisy. We put them in a combination of, you know, like commercial and residential. And we really had very little complaints ever after the fact.
Thank you.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, in the comprehensive plan, I mean, there was a lot of discussion on what kind of things would go there by the turnpike. And, you know, how many people would want to have their home right next to the turnpike? I mean, Peter's pretty close, probably the closest of any of us. And he knows what that's like, the sound and stuff. And it is just prime, you know. I want to get a truck into an industrial park off the turnpike, man, it's right there. And a lot of cities, as you go to Kansas City, I mean, you're hitting industrial park after industrial park all the way up there. When you go down to Dallas, you're hitting industrial park, all the way down the freeway. I mean, it's not that it's different, but I know this is Andover. It's a quaint little village, you know, a bedroom community for Wichita, but we're trying to build it into its own identity. And it takes business to do that.
And jobs.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents.
Well, let's move on then. I guess agenda item 5.4. That's what you guys have, right?
Yep.
All right. I think I'm on track. Which is a public hearing on case number Z-SU23-0006. It's important that you present any facts or views you have as evidence so that an informed recommendations can be made by the Planning Commission to the governing body for their final decision. By state statute, the governing body does not have to hold another public hearing on the matter, although they may listen to whomever they wish. You will be asked if there's any new information which was not heard at this hearing. It is to everyone's advantage if you present all of this necessary information at this hearing. After the city zoning administrator provides the commission with background information, I will call upon the applicant. Public comments will be heard following the applicant. After all speakers have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The Planning Commission will close the hearing to public comments, and then will consider the 14 factors on which to base the recommendation. During this time, the commission may direct questions to the applicant, the public, and/or city staff. You should be aware that the Planning Commission can recommend that the site be platted or replatted if necessary, and that a site plan may be required for approval. You should be aware that any uses permitted outright in a district by the regulations can receive a zoning permit. Furthermore, if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so your comments can be recorded for inclusion in our minutes. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them tend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
Official hearing for this notice was published in the City of Andover municipal website on December 23rd, 2023, and notices were mailed to applicants and real property owners of record in the area of notification on December 22nd, 2023. The record shows that at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and hearing date. Unless there's evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the commission if any of them have received any ex parte, verbal, or written communications prior to this hearing, which they would like to share.
None.
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 I'll now call on the city's zoning administrator to provide us for a report on this case.
Mr. Chairman, Planning Commission, I think Connor did a great job of summarizing this application. It's a 2.7 acre parcel in the middle of the city that is currently zoned by a special use for a skilled nursing care facility. You can see that it's kind of an odd shaped parcel. It's tucked in behind a shopping center and a medical clinic. The applicant is here tonight seeking another special use to allow intermediate adult care facility. And he stated his intentions are to possibly use the existing building for treating substance abuse and mental health patients.
Thank you. I'll now call on the applicant to make his or her presentation on the request and any response to the zoning administrator's report. Is the applicant here? Go for it. If you would state your name and address.
Good evening, Frank Brader, JD Winston LLC, 601 Heritage Drive, Suite 150, Jupiter, Florida, 33458. Home and business. A little chilly here, coming
Yeah.
from Florida today. So,
Yeah.
my case is simple. I work on these type of facilities nationwide. This particular facility lends itself very well, physically speaking, to an SUD or substance use disorder treatment center, RTC, residential treatment center, RTF, residential treatment facility, these acronyms. And I'm specifically referring to inside. All the units are en suite, and have their own bathrooms. There's not hallway showers. It's well built. It's well maintained. There's excess area for group rooms and therapy offices and things like this. It's tucked away. It's not on Main and Mains per se, being that it is behind the shopping center and the medical building. A monument sign is all this, would require, but it's not up front and center. And because it's of a skilled nursing facility use, which is an overnight medical use, although not hospital, just speaking in general terms, that pretty much matches, is on par with what detoxification rehabilitation is, where the clients stay anywhere from, generally 3 to 30 days for rehab.
Okay. Very good. Any commission questions for the applicant?
I'm just curious, are the individuals that'll be there, are they there on their own free will
Always.
or?
Always sign in, sign out of your, if someone signs out, we call it AMA. It's against medical advice, of course, if you're trying to get sober, but be that as may, there's no one held against their will at any time.
Okay, I was just wondering if they
Sure.
were committed or if it was.
Even if
all-
they're court ordered to rehab, for example, and this is always the question I get, they don't have to come to this rehab. They can go to any rehab. So
Okay,
even court ordered, they can sign out and say, I don't like this place. I'm going somewhere else. That's between them and the court, but no one is held against their will at any point in time.
okay.
Any other questions?
Is it affiliated with the Victoria Center right next door?
No, it's physically, I think, no, we're not affiliated. The owner of the building, I don't believe owns Victoria Falls. He owns the medical building in front, right? No. That was obviously the same builder at one time, being the motif and everything, but no, not now.
Any other questions?
And there appears to be adequate interchange if emergency vehicles need to come. There's plenty of handicap parking as well, so.
Sure, you can see in that aerial photo that this building and the assisted living next door, as well as the medical center out front, share some driveways for circulation around all three of the buildings.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming all the way up. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak in this case? Have any written communication been received? No. Hearing no further public comments, I'll hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the commission wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The Planning Commission will now deliberate the request. There are 14 factors which the commission must consider in order to make findings and ultimately a recommendation.
I can read those.
Okay.
Factors and findings. Staff items. Number 1, do adequate sewage disposal and water supply and all other necessary public facilities, including street access, exist, or can they be provided to serve the uses that would be permitted on the subject property if the change in zoning were approved? Staff comments. The subject property is served with public streets, water, and sewer. Number 2, if the special use request was approved, would the subject property need to be platted or replatted or have in lieu of dedications made in order to provide needed right-of-ways, easements, building setback lines, or access control? Staff comments, the subject property is platted. Number 3, the special use request was, if the special use request was approved, would the subject property need a screening plan for existing or potential uses? Staff comments that screening and buffering are provided. Number 4, what fact-based information in support of or in opposition to the requested zoning change has staff received? Staff comments, none at this time. Number 5, if there has been an error in the application of these zoning regulations to the subject property, would the requested zoning change correct the error? Staff comments that no errors are known to exist. Staff and commission council items. Number 6, how suitable or unsuitable is the subject property for its current use? Staff comments, the subject property is suitable for its current zoning.
Concur.
Concur. Number 7, the length of time the subject property has been vacant or underdeveloped under its current zoning, a factor in the special use request. Staff, yes, the skilled nursing facility has been vacant for some time. The skilled nursing care business was particularly hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Concur.
Concur. Number 8, how reasonably well suited will the requested special use of the subject property be with the current zoning of nearby properties? Staff comments, the proposed use is compatible in use and intensity to the former skilled nursing care facility. Screening and buffering have been provided between the existing building and the surrounding properties.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 9, has a special use been requested because conditions in the area of the subject property have changed or are changing? If so, what is the nature and significance of these conditions? Staff comments, yes, the skilled nursing facility has been vacant for some time. The skilled nursing care business was particularly hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Many skilled nursing care facilities across the nations are being converted to other uses.
Concur.
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 Number 10, what are the current land uses, character, and condition of the subject property and the surrounding neighborhood? Staff, the surrounding land uses are widely mixed with mixed commercial, institutional, and residential uses.
Concur.
Concur. Number 11, would the proposed special use of the subject property allow land uses which might have detrimental effects on nearby properties, and if so, how? Staff, the proposed use is no more intensive than the existing permitted skilled nursing care facility use.
Concur.
Concur.
Number 12, how would the requested special use conform with the city's comprehensive plan and other adopted master plans and policies? Staff comments, the surrounding land uses are widely mixed as proposed in the future city center place type. The proposed use fits within the cluster of existing medical, institutional uses, and commercial available activity.
Concur.
Concur. 13, do any professional persons knowledgeable on conditions that affect the special use request have information or recommendations to provide which would be helpful in its evaluation? Staff, approval as applied for.
Concur.
Concur.
And number 14, how would the potential loss in value or hardship imposed on the applicant compare to the relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare if there is a change from the current use to the requested use? Staff comments. Staff perceives no detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare created by the minor change in use.
Concur. Having discussed and reached conclusions on our findings of fact, I would remind the commission that a proper motion should reflect the factors on which it is based. And if approval is recommended, then consideration should be given to any conditions that might be attached. Is there a motion to either recommend approval, modification and approval, disapproval, or to table the discussion?
I'll make that motion, first motion. Having considered the evidence at the hearing and factors to evaluate the application, I, Marla Canfield, move we recommend to the governing body that case number ZSU 23006 be approved based on the findings of the Planning Commission on findings 7, 9, 10, and 11 as recorded in the summary of this hearing.
I, Gary Israel, second the motion.
Thank you, Marla and Gary. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The case will be forwarded to the governing body with the Planning Commission's recommendation and a written summary of the hearing for consideration at the regular meeting of January, I've got an X there. 30th, right? Yeah, okay, I assume so. All right. The regular meeting on January 30th, 2024. The recording of this hearing will be retained for at least 60 days and after the final determination is completed on this case. Protest petitions against the case, but not directed to the commission's recommendations as such, may be received by the city clerk for 14 days after tonight, January 30th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. If there are properly signed protest petitions with accurate legal descriptions from the owners of record of 20% or more of the total real property owners within the official area of notification, both inside and outside of the city, and not counting public streets right-of-ways or specific statutorily excluded property, then such a change shall not be passed except by a 3/4 vote of all members of the city council. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. Sure.
Yes, special use permit. I just need clarification on this. Yeah, I'm under the impression that this is good for 1 year. And then thereafter, can in some shape or form modify. Is that the case or is it, does it become permanent after city council?
The change isn't effective until it's approved by the city council and published on the city's website.
But then how long it lasts?
It lasts as long as it's being used for the permitted use.
Purpose.
Okay. Yep. Well, let's move on then to 5.5.
No, Mr. Chairperson, I make a motion, Gary Israel make a motion to recess the planning commission and convene the Board of Zoning
Yeah,
Appeals.
thanks, Gary. Very good. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All
Marla
right.
Canfield.
We have a motion and a second to recess the planning commission and convene the Board of Zoning and Appeals. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thanks, Gary. Let's move on to 5.5 now.
Thank you for coming.
Yep, thank you. Well, thanks for your investment in our community. Let's see here. All right, 5.5. I now call agenda item 5.5, which is a public hearing on case BZA-V23-0015. We'd like to welcome everyone interested in this hearing and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views that you have as evidence at this hearing so that findings can be made for the decision of this board. In order to grant a variance, 5 specific written findings of fact must be met according to the state statutes and the zoning regulations. This board is authorized by the state statutes to make a decision appealable only to district court and not to the governing body. After our zoning administrator provides us with some information, I will call upon the applicant and we will hear from other interested parties. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The board will close the hearing to further public comments and then consider their decision, during which time they may direct questions to the applicant, the public, or staff. You should be aware that the public can require such conditions to be attached to the premises benefited by the variance as may be necessary to comply with the standards set out in Article 11.106. These are to reduce any potentially injurious effects of such variance upon other property in the neighborhood and to carry out the public purpose and intent of these regulations. Failure to comply with any of these regulations attached to a zoning permit for a variance shall constitute a violation of the regulations. You should be also aware that the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans. The city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and their address. Please use the podium to speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we proceed in the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them had intended to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
Official notice for this hearing was published on the City of Andover Municipal website on December 23rd, 2023, and notices were mailed to the applicant and real property owners of record in the area of December 22nd, 2023. The record shows that at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the board if any of them have received any ex parte, verbal, or written communications prior to the hearing which they would like to share. I will now call on the city zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. This is a very typical request for a variance for a pool house in the rear yard of this property. The property is over 2 acres. The current limitations are a maximum of a 500 square foot accessory structure. The applicant intends to build about a 750 square foot structure on that 2.5 acres. There's adequate space all the way around the proposed location for separation from the neighbors, both sides and the rear.
Thank you, Les. I assume there isn't one, but I'll now call upon the applicant to make his or her presentation on the request and in response to the zoning administrator's report. Seeing no one's here, are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this case? Have any written communication been received? No. Do you guys have any questions? Commission have any questions of Les?
Why so small?
For those of us that have been on the committee for a while, we see these a lot, especially in Flint Hills. It seems like, so pretty straightforward, really.
Yeah.
Nothing else?
248 square feet on 2.5 acres. I think that's fairly minimal restriction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll move on then. Hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the board wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The board will now deliberate the request. To determine whether evidence presented supports the conclusions of the required finding of fact, the board will now consider the criteria provided for evaluation. I can do this one. My voice is holding out. Does the evidence demonstrate that, one, the physical surrounding shape or topography of the property would result in a practical difficulty as distinguished from a mere inconvenience for the owner, lessee, or occupant? Staff, the subject property is a 2.3 acre lot adjacent to the golf course with adequate space for the proposed accessory structure and required building setbacks.
Concur.
Two, granting the variance will result in a material detriment or injury to the property or improvements in the neighborhood. Staff, no detriment and/or injury to other property or improvements is anticipated.
Concur.
Three, granting the variance will result in an inadequate supply of light or air to adjacent property, substantially increased traffic congestion, increased fire risk, or substantially diminished property values in the neighborhood. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
Four, the request for a variance is not based exclusively on the desire of the owner, lessee, occupant, or applicant to make more money out of the property. Staff, the proposed 748 square foot accessory structure is simply the owner's desire to build a pool house with storage and patio space adjacent to the swimming pool.
Concur.
Specific conditions to be met. The requested variance arises from a condition unique to the property in question, which is not ordinarily found in the same zoning district, and which was not created by any action of the property owner or the applicant. Staff, the subject property is a 2.3 acre lot adjacent to the golf course with adequate space for the proposed accessory structure and required building setbacks.
Concur.
Two, strict application of the zoning provisions of these zoning regulations would result in a necessary hardship for the owner, lessee, or occupant of the land or structures. Staff, the subject property is a 2.3 acre lot adjacent to the golf course with adequate space for proposed accessory structure and required building setbacks. The subject property and adjacent properties are large lots with large setbacks from each other.
Concur.
Three, granting the variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
Four, the requested variance will not adversely affect the public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. Staff, no adverse effects are anticipated.
Concur.
Five, the requested variance will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of these zoning regulations. Staff, the subject property is a 2.3 acre lot adjacent to the golf course with adequate space for the proposed accessory structure and required building setbacks. The subject property and adjacent properties are large lots with large setbacks from each other.
Concur.
Concur.
You know, the applicant's not here this evening, but I would imagine the HOA is going to hold their feet to the fire that the construction of this facility is going to match the house.
Is there a motion to either approve, modify and approve, or disapprove, or table in discussion?
I'll make the motion. Having considered the evidence in the hearing and determined that the findings of fact have been found to exist in support of all 5 conditions set out in subsection 11-106.B2 of the zoning regulations and KSA 12-79E, I, Marla Canfield, move that the chairperson be authorized to sign a resolution granting the variance for case number BZA V230015 as requested.
Thank you, Marla. Do we have a second?
I'll second Peter Fox.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. A resolution will be prepared and available to the applicant as soon as reasonably possible, but no later than 45 days from the date of this hearing. If anyone is aggrieved by this decision, a further appeal can be made to the district court to determine its reasonableness within 30 days after the resolution is signed and filed with the zoning administrator. All right, let's move on to item 5.6. I now call agenda item 5.6, which is a public hearing on case number BZA-V23-0014. We'd like to welcome everyone that's interested in this hearing and lay out a few ground rules. It's important that you present any facts or views that you have as evidence at this hearing so that findings can be made for the decision of this board. In order to grant a variance, 5 specific written findings of fact must all be met according to the state statutes and the city's zoning regulations. This board is authorized by state statutes to make a decision appealable only to district court and not to the governing body. After our zoning administrator provides us with some information, I will call upon the applicant and then we'll hear from other interested parties. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The board will close the public hearing, or board will close the hearing to the public for further public comments and then consider their decision, during which time they may be direct questions to the applicant, the public, or staff. You should be aware that the board can require such conditions to be attached to the premises benefited by the variance as may be necessary to comply with the standards set out in Article 11.106. These are to reduce any potentially injurious effects of subject variance upon other property in the neighborhood to carry out the general purpose and intent of these regulations. Failure to comply with any of these conditions attached to a zoning permit or a variance shall constitute a violation of the regulations. You should also be aware that if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in the zoning and other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson to give their name and address. Please use the podium to speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area at notification or have any conflicts of interest.
No.
None.
Official notice of this hearing was published on the City of Andover Municipal website on December 23rd, 2023. And notices were mailed to the applicant and real property owners of record in the area of notification on December 22nd, 2023. The notice shows at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there's evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare that the proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the board if any of them have received any ex parte verbal or written communications prior to this hearing which they'd like to share.
None.
I will now call on the city's zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
This is a rather unusual case for a variance. The applicant in this case owns the property adjacent to the west where there's an existing metal storage building. He's applying for a variance in trying to get the largest building he can get on this very small lot that he recently purchased. If you look at that aerial photo, it's kind of unusual in that it's in a area of old original Andover where streets were platted after the fact, and there's kind of a hodgepodge in the setbacks of buildings in the area. He's applying for that variance, trying to keep more in line with the existing building to the east rather than the building he owns to the west, which has a much larger setback. Now, he's told us that his intended use for this property is for somewhat of an event center for his family and friends for the sports events at the stadium across the street. We've informed him that in order to do that, he'll have to apply for a special use in that B2 neighborhood business district, which will bring site plan review standards into the layout of the building. We'll be surprised if he actually makes it through the entire process and is able to utilize the full extent of the variance that he's applied for because of required landscaping, front yards, and parking in front of this building. So that's kind of the long story about a very small lot in old original Andover.
Les, didn't we look at this piece of
Yeah.
property a while back that an individual was trying to put a business on there?
Yes, you did.
Wasn't it
The
Reagan?
the previous owner platted the property with intent of building an office on it. He couldn't make it work for his use, for his office use. He just couldn't come up with a building and the required parking that suited his real estate business.
I know the building to the, I always get, that's north. The storage building next to it that's owned by, oh, gee, I can't remember. It's got the cars.
The applicant in this case owns that building now.
Oh,
And-
he owns that building now? Oh, so I
Yes.
guess it's sold then.
To
That
the,
used
to
to
the
be-
west, the applicant owns that building also.
Is that number 121?
Yes,
Okay, that used to be owned by
Walker.
Jay Walker, where he had his cars. I know that whenever there's a sporting event, I do not go down Allison to get to my house because they're always having a tailgating party there. So if that's his intent to have a facility where they can pull lawn chairs and stuff out, just build a building where you can put the chairs in and a big parking lot in front.
Sure.
Is there a building on that property right now, or has it been cleared?
It's vacant.
There is not. Several years ago, there was a very small house that was demolished. I think it even still shows.
say, I
Yeah,
think we
it does
see
still
it.
show on
Shows
the
it.
aerial
Yeah.
photo.
Yeah.
I drove by and I didn't see it. I'm going, mhm, something's not right.
Yeah, those aerial photos are a little deceiving. In some places, they're very current, and in other places, they're many years behind.
Thank you, Les.
Thanks.
I don't see an applicant, but I'll now call upon the applicant to make their presentation if they want to, but or in response to the zoning administrator report. Any members of the public wish to speak? Have any written communication been received? No. No applicant to present any final comments. Anybody else have any final questions?
I don't have in my packet, the facts and findings.
Yeah, neither do I.
I don't either.
Okay.
Connor?
It's not in mine either.
I guess what are they asking for a variance on? Like
Size.
the size.
Make it bigger than,
Okay.
Yeah, just change the setback so that they can have
Okay.
a bigger building.
I apologize. I wasn't.
He's asking for a variance of the front yard setback as well as to exceed the maximum size of his building.
Okay.
He wants almost 46% coverage, right?
Correct.
Versus allowed 30?
Max is 30, the two variances are just the front setback and then the coverage of the lot. He wants the building to pretty much fill the lot. There's an easement in the rear, the southern bit where there's like a weird dip,
Mhm.
goes straight across there, there's an easement, and then easement runs to the setbacks on the sides. And a bunch of easements.
But with site plan review, he would have to have an allotted amount of parking spaces,
Right.
correct? Still?
Right. That's why I said, I have no real heartburn with exceeding the maximum size of a structure because this property is surrounded by similar sized buildings. That front yard variance, what he's got in his mind and he's explained to Connor is that he would be providing adequate setback from the curb, not his property line. When this gets to site plan review, they're going to be looking at the property line and applying parking standards from the property line, not the road curb. So it'll be interesting to see how this works its way through the rest of the system.
So our role here, I mean, if we know it's going to be a problem, what do we do here? I mean,
Well, we can approve this part, but then the rest of the process he has to go through,
Yeah.
essentially. Probably not.
You will be holding a public hearing on the special use for the event center, and the site plan review committee will look at his building plans and apply the landscaping, screening, and parking standards.
In future meetings if it gets that far. Is
Connor's going to get those pages. For some reason, that's a Word document. And all that made it in the document is the first and the last page of a 4-page.
Yeah, I was looking for it and I was like, am I missing something? Because we just did one. We have to go through all those.
In
So,
this drawing, is he trying to build a 55-foot by 60-foot building on that lot?
That's the drawing he provided us. And that's how he came up with those variances from front yard setback and maximum coverage.
So he's looking at the 10-foot setbacks all the way around, except for the
Except
front.
for the front,
It's 17.
where he would have,
I think it's 17 feet.
Yeah, this is another case where it'd be nice for the applicant to be here.
yeah. So
Yeah, I
is
mean-
1653 a residence?
Mr. Chairperson, can I make a motion that we table this and have the applicant be here for our next
I like
meeting?
that idea.
sure, you can always ask to continue the meeting to our next date.
That would be my motion.
I would second that motion.
Okay. Gary, you're making the motion to table?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second? All right,
I second.
all those in favor say aye.
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 Well, are we supposed to do the findings of fact first? I'm not clear on that. We can just do that anytime? It's out of order
You
here,
can-
but,
You can make that motion at any time.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It's
Well-
just he's trying to fill the whole lot.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea. All right,
Just to understand.
all right.
See,
Well, we have a
we've done
motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion passes.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairperson, I make a motion to recess the Board of Zoning Appeals and reconvene the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Any member items?
Connor's doing a great job.
Yeah, I'd like to congratulate Connor on being so swift with that paperwork and not needing it now.
Yeah, thanks, Connor.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I make a motion, we adjourn the meeting.
All right.
I second the motion.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 I
All right, motion passes. Thank you.
So do you have, oh, you're using your laptop.
Yeah.
So